Frank Abagnale, right?
Yeah.
All right. When he lies, does he lie in order to hurt himself, or does he lie in order to benefit himself?
Benefit.
Absolutely, right? So Frank Abagnale pulls off all these heists, poses as a doctor and as a lawyer and Pan Am pilot and all, but his lies are to benefit himself. First century followers of Christ, maybe they lied, maybe they exaggerated about the resurrection of Christ, but how did it benefit them?
To base my faith on something like that, because there's no, I know there's evidence, but there's no first person evidence. There's no way for you to say for sure that actually happened. I know there's a lot of manuscripts and things that do follow that, but what if, like I know it's a hypothetical, you don't like those, but hypothetically, what if someone started this, like a story of this happening, and it just kind of manifested from there, and then all the descriptions and manuscripts started building upon that?
Well, I don't think that's hypothetical. I think that's a very serious possibility that I better check into.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
maybe Jesus was a myth.
Well, not Jesus. I'm not saying Jesus, but possibly the resurrection or any of the supernatural.
Well, I better be checking that out. Because if Jesus is a myth, or if his resurrection is a myth, I'm an idiot for believing in him. I'm out of touch with reality. I'm living a lie. And to be honest with you, sir, I don't want to live a lie. I don't want to live out of touch with reality. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I want to get in touch with reality. I want to pursue truth. So, you're asking a very good question. And that's why I have to study historicity. How do I determine what's historically true? But also, I've got to acknowledge that historical knowledge is a legitimate form of knowledge. Right?
Yeah.
This whole idea that people throw at me, oh, unless you can scientifically prove it, it's not true. What? A lie? That is so self-refuting and scary. Please scientifically prove to me that unless you can scientifically prove it, it's not true. I mean, that's the most ridiculous line of thinking I can imagine. And yet it's scary how many Americans buy right into that. Oh, unless you can scientifically prove it, it's not true. Oh, really? That's such a philosophy. That's such a faith. It's scary.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly on that.
So, science is a wonderful branch of knowledge, but it's just a branch. You go to history, and you're not talking about the repeatability of an experiment as you are in science. You're talking about the trustworthiness of eyewitness testimony. I mean, I was speaking at UCLA. This guy tried to debate me that the Holocaust never took place. It was a plot by Jewish people to garner Gentile sympathy. Yo, come on, man. Prove to me the Holocaust happened. Well, I'm sorry, sir, I can't prove it, but here's the historical evidence. I don't believe it. I said, well, man, that's scary. So I can't prove Jesus Christ existed, but the overwhelming historical evidence is Jesus Christ really existed. Lived an amazing life, died, and then rose from the dead. And here's the best reason to not believe that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. God doesn't exist, therefore miracles can't take place, therefore there's no resurrection. Fine, but let's be honest with each other. That starts with the philosophical presupposition that there's no supernatural God, and because there's no supernatural God, obviously dead people can never rise from the dead. But if you allow for the possibility of a supernatural God, then it's totally reasonable that he can perform a miracle, which is simply changing the laws of nature that he created in the first place, and perform a miracle, a resurrection. Does that make any sense?
No, I see exactly what you're saying, you know?
Uh-huh.
And my question's not exactly on, like, whether Jesus existed or not, but whether, how can you be sure of the faith in God in total? I know you're saying you're because of evidence of Jesus and him resurrecting from the dead, and it's those supernatural feats that help you trust him and believe in him, correct? Okay.
Yes, yeah, his resurrection definitely helps me believe in it, correct.
Yeah, but there's, this doesn't sit right with me entirely.
Good, what doesn't sit right?
Well, for one, stories can get exaggerated over time.
Sure.
You know, and they can be exaggerated at the time. They can be exaggerated for the benefits of the people writing the stories, or for any number of reasons.
Great point. For the benefit of those writing the stories.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. Now think about that one. You ever seen that movie Catch Me If You Can?
Yeah, I love that movie. Actually, I watched it last night.
You did? Yeah. Awesome, man. All right. Frank Abagnale, right?
Yeah.
All right. When he lies, does he lie in order to hurt himself, or does he lie in order to benefit himself?
Benefit.
Absolutely, right? So Frank Abagnale pulls off all these heists, poses as a doctor and as a lawyer and Pan Am pilot and all. But his lies are to benefit himself. First century followers of Christ, maybe they lied. Maybe they exaggerated about the resurrection of Christ. But how did it benefit them? They died martyrs' deaths.
No, I agree. I think the Christian moral system is a very strong system, and
Wait, but not just the moral system. Think about it. You're right. People exaggerate and people lie. But you don't exaggerate, you don't lie to hurt yourself. You exaggerate and lie to benefit yourself. So, if the first century eyewitnesses of the resurrection of Christ were lying, wait a second. Where did the lie end them? It ended them on torches in Nero's gardens, in the Roman amphitheater being torn to shreds by lions. It led to the Apostle Peter being crucified. So what's going on here? You begin to see the evidence is they're not lying because they didn't benefit from this story. Instead, they insisted we saw this stuff, his resurrection, and then they were willing to die for what they claimed to have seen. Right?
But if they had lied, then that destroys your reason for believing in the Christian faith in the first place.
Oh, yeah. If the evidence is they lied, I would not be a follower of Christ.
But, I see what you're saying, because it didn't benefit them, they could have lied. Okay.
You see, you don't have Frank Abagnale going out and lying in order to hurt himself, cheating in order to hurt himself. He's lying and cheating in order to benefit himself. See, I don't know of anybody who's going to lie and cheat in order to hurt themselves. And so if those first century eyewitnesses of the resurrected Christ were really lying, they were pretty dumb, because their lie led to their martyrdom.
Yeah, but then that follows the same problem in the first place, the exaggeration of the stories. There's no way to necessarily know how true those stories were. You know?
Well, if you say you saw something, and then you're willing to die for that claim that you really saw something, that gives your claim that you saw it a lot of credibility. Right?
That's correct.
Look at Watergate. 3 brilliant American lawyers, Dean, Ehrlichman, and Haldeman, were not willing to go through too many years in prison in order to cover up what they knew to be a lie, the Watergate scandal. They all broke under pressure. So you're right, it's possible that the eyewitnesses of the resurrected Christ were lying, that he didn't really rise from the dead. But when you begin to examine the way they lived and how they died, you begin to realize, whoa, that's highly unlikely.
I agree that it's highly unlikely for them to lie about that
Mm-hmm.
in those circumstances, but then it's hard to say whether the stories written about the whole incident was not exaggerated. You know, but that's all circular. It's all about what's true and what's not true.
That's exactly right. It's all about what's true and what's not true.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
About.
Yeah, you hit that one right out of the ballpark. You're right. Yes, sir. That's what the issue is.
Yeah.
Is it true or is it false?
So that's what it would take for you, as you say, to not believe in this, is find out that's a lie?
Exactly. Okay. If I found out that Jesus Christ had not risen from the dead, my faith in Christ is bankrupt. It's worthless.
Okay.
Because, you see, I'm convinced he's the truth. And if it's shown that he's a liar, I put my faith in the wrong object.
I don't know if you will claim to prove it, or I don't know if I could prove it, but these people have the notion that once they die, a follower of Jesus and a believer of his God, then they're going to have an eternity in heaven. That's their benefit they were going for. Just like in current modern times, the media inflates the story that these suicide bombers and such are killing themselves because they're going to be received a quantitative benefit of, I forgot the number of virgins when they die for their cause. Huh? 72. Yes. And so I'm thinking the example you gave in Catch Me If You Can, obviously this guy's benefits were purely like quantitative, monetary, physical. He did all these heists for money. he didn't do it for this ethereal amorphous benefit that these people were promised. And necessarily by dying, it links them to this benefit, as in they can't get this benefit when they're alive. So then what's the distinction between the whole benefit story?
You bet.
Okay.
Here's the distinction. As Jewish men, they understood, if I put my faith in Jesus Christ, I will go to hell. That's their background. That's their culture. That's where they've gone to synagogue and been taught. Therefore, your scenario is, they understand as Jewish men, we believe in Yeshua as Messiah, we're probably going to go to hell, is what we've been taught by the rabbis. Now, I'm going to construct a lie. And the lie is that Jesus rose from the dead. I know it's a lie, I know it's false. But I'm going to believe this lie and promulgate this lie. And where's it going to lead me? To heaven? But if Jesus isn't risen from the dead, I know he's false. And what I got to deal with now is the fact that my whole cultural experience, my whole upbringing has taught me, if I believe in this false Messiah and commit blasphemy and worship him as God, I'm going to hell. That's what they're facing.
I wasn't talking about just Jewish people, though.
Well, they're the guys who wrote about it.
Oh, were they predominantly Jewish?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was the Jewish people who saw Christ, and there were a few exceptions to that, but the overwhelming majority of them were Jewish people.
Okay. But once again, that's necessarily what they believed in the end. They weren't really sure. It was promised to them, you see? And even if they did see it or not, I think at a certain point there's going to be a problem of, first, another thing you said last with the discussion, you said there's historical evidence and scientific evidence and different sectors of knowledge. But I think even within this historical evidence section, I think there are varying degrees of accuracy and value we place on certain historical evidences.
Okay.
I mean, you know, for example, if there was a piece of paper found in, you know, somewhere post-Civil War that said the South won, and then right now all of our textbooks say the North actually won, there are varying degrees of historical accuracy.
Good.
You see?
Right.
And so when you were claiming that whole bunch, and so now let's go back to our story of how these people wrote about these things because of the perceived benefit they would receive, and how then they would go to hell if it was not true or if it was true.
Yeah.
Then there are varying degrees of historical accuracy that would be the first buffer between that story actually translating from what happened then to us now. And even then, if we look at that story in it as a whole, you're going to see the problem of, even if the story wasn't true for them, if some person were to prove it to them, the first block for me would be that then I would less likely believe Jesus actually died in the beginning. He probably never died. That's more highly plausible. Because as historical accuracy dictates, back then, medicine and medical technology were far behind what we were now. Thus, the diagnoses of Jesus' body, which proclaimed he was probably dead, could have been much more historically off than if we were to do that now. So that would be my first place of, really did he die? Even if even if these men were Jewish, and predominantly they were Jewish, and then by claiming the story that he did rise and then believe in him and then go to hell, it didn't matter to them anymore because now they are under the Christian religion. Because if they believe in him now, then no longer are they under the Jewish religion and the Judaism faith, which says that they will go to hell for believing in him. They are now under the Christian religion, which is a separate one that is a new entity that they created. Thus, they have nothing to worry about.
But they know it's false.
Well, that's under the pretense that he actually did resurrect.
No.
But either way.
Where we started was, you're convinced that they lied. They lied about the resurrection. So in other words, what you're saying is, they lied about the resurrection of Christ, which means they knew he did not rise from the dead, but they lied about it. And they based their life on it. Okay, let me tell you why I can't go there. If I were to offer you $5,000 right now, if you could believe that there's a beautiful, wonderful pink elephant right on your right, do Do you think you could believe that, honestly, sincerely,
$5,000?
for $5,000?
I could do much more. Currently.
Okay, I disagree.
But I mean, I'm sorry.
I disagree.
Sorry for being very,
No.
But, no, I wouldn't. I know what you're
Okay,
trying
good.
to say. Yes.
Why can't? No, not just wouldn't, but why can't you? Why for $5,000 can't you believe that there's a pink elephant on your right hand?
Because there isn't.
Thank you. Because your mind is so committed to understanding what is true that even for $5,000 in cash right now, you cannot sincerely believe that there's a pink elephant on your right hand. Isn't that amazing? That we are hardwired that way, that we cannot, even for 5 or 10 grand, play a game in our head and really believe that that thing's there when it's not. Which is why I'm convinced that the scenario that you just pictured is impossible. It is impossible for these Jewish men to lie and to say, we saw Christ risen from the dead, knowing full well that he was still dead. And not only do we say we really believe it, we believe it so intensely that we're willing to die for it. My experience of human beings is that don't happen. You can't get people to do that.
Well, I mean, but the distinction I was pointing out happens prior to that story. Because once again, or is it after? Once again, it doesn't necessarily matter to them if they die martyrs or not. Because either way, they're going to receive this benefit. And even in our little scenario, $5,000 is once again a physical benefit, as opposed to what these people believed were like an ethereal benefit.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. They're lying through their teeth, because all that ethereal benefit is based on a resurrection of Christ. And you are positing that they lied, which is a possibility that they lied. But if they lied, then you're positing that they're willing to die to cover up what they know to be a lie, and you're positing that they know it's false, but they've tricked themselves into believing it's true. Sir, my experience is you can't do that. I mean, people don't do that.
Well, I mean...
Maybe that's not true. I have met some psychologically sick people who do that, but that's an example of their psychological disease. It's a symptom of their psychological disease. If you're balanced psychologically, you can't force yourself to believe something that you know is a lie. It just doesn't work. That's why I don't care if I offered you $1 million. You could not force yourself to really believe that there's a pink elephant on your head, because you know with your head, that's false, man. There is no pink elephant on my right hand. And that is why God values our faith. God values our faith because that is a statement of respect to God. That I believe you are the truth. No, I can't prove it. I believe you're good, and I'm trusting you. I'm putting my faith in you. And that's why God treasures our faith.
Maximize your happiness. And not only that, I feel like you could have a very strong case in our modern day and age with all the wonderful technology we have, that Christianity, while it might make you happier in previous ages when it's so miserable and people are starving and dying, that it would maximize your happiness with that hope. But today, we're relatively content in our lives, and the restrictions, moral restrictions that atheism puts on your life might in fact decrease your happiness. Possibly. I don't know. So you, definitely it's essential to you that it's actually true. Do you see what I mean? Like
yes. Yes.
So if I don't believe it's true, I guess it's a no-brainer to you to put your faith in him, but for me, who doesn't believe it's true, it's not really so easy.
Okay, so what do you believe is so reliable that you should trust it ultimately? Yourself, right?
At the moment, yeah, I'm looking.
Okay, but what's the evidence that points to you being that trustworthy, that credible?
Well, at least I know I exist. I'm pretty sure I exist.
Good.
I mean...
I agree.
So that's as far as I've gotten, I guess. I mean...
Yeah, but does not your existence point to the existence of God?
Some people think so. I'm not so sure.
Why are you not so sure?
Because, I mean, everyone's heard the Big Bang Theory. So you ask this question, why are there trees? Why are there so many people here who are living in really complicated it seems improbable, but I guess maybe my logic is bad, but that doesn't seem to my mind to necessitate something larger. So that was a little vague.
All right, how about this one? Beaver dams. Point to beavers, Macon. Golden Gate Bridge, no beavers. Built that thing. The complexity of the design demands some human brains behind it. Universe, far more complex than the Golden Gate Bridge.
I've thought about that argument, but I think you could also argue that the universe is simpler than the universe plus God. So in fact, by introducing God, you're making it more complex. Does that make sense? So you're
You really
saying
believe that?
Yeah. I mean, where did God come from? What explains how he acts? What are his motives? That seems like that brings a lot more complexities into addition to the world.
No, because the universe is not eternal. The universe has a beginning. Therefore, the universe has to have a cause.
Well,
God is an eternal being. There's no needed cause for God. God's an uncaused cause, but the universe obviously is not uncaused because it has a beginning. It has to have a cause.
I mean, I feel like. Okay, just to make sure I understand your argument, you're saying, okay, the world has a beginning.
Right.
All things that have a beginning must have a cause.
Correct.
Here's God. He doesn't have a beginning.
Correct.
So that's simple. Well, why can't we just say the world didn't have a beginning?
Because the Big Bang shows us the universe does have a beginning.
I don't know if it's that simple. I think the Big Bang could be a little more complicated in that it says there is no time. Like time itself. Once all the matter's in one. I mean, I don't really understand relativity and all that stuff, but it seems possible that at least time itself didn't even exist. And if that's the case, then any causal argument like that might not hold as much water, because it's essentially your argument that all things that have a beginning must have a cause.
Mm-hmm.
But what does a beginning mean if time doesn't even exist?
Well, it very simply means the universe is not eternal. The universe has a beginning, the Big Bang. And that's what drove Einstein out of pantheism into theism. And he didn't like it either. He introduced the fudge factor into his mathematical equations to try and disprove the Big Bang. Because Einstein saw very clearly, if the Big Bang is true, there's got to be a cause. There's got to be a creator. There's got to be some type of theistic God.
Yeah, I'm not aware with Einstein's beliefs, but...
Yeah, but it's very logical. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. Design demands a designer. Moral absolutes demand a moral lawgiver.
Definitely agree with that.
Well, then you should be a theist, right?
Well, no. I mean, you still
Why
haven't.
not?
You still haven't convinced me that the world necessarily has a beginning, or even that it
Well,
means.
forget about that, okay? Because guess what?
That's
If
essential.
tomorrow...
How can you forget about it?
No, because it's just one piece of evidence, that's all.
Okay. Well.
I'm just
it's
following
essential
evidence.
to that argument, I guess. So, what's another argument?
Well, no, we finally found one you agree with me on. All right? So you agree that there's some moral absolutes, and therefore there's got to be a moral lawgiver, right?
Well, no.
Oh, shoot.
No. Sorry. If there are moral absolutes, there certainly is something to give it. I'm not
Okay,
agreeing
good.
that there are moral absolutes.
Oh, you don't think there are?
Not without a God, no.
No,
That's
I mean,
one reason I want to
do you
believe in
think there
God.
are moral absolutes?
No.
No? When is the abuse of an innocent child ever good?
I'm not. That's a little bit different. I mean, no. Our conception of what good is certainly defined, at least in some extent, in our world and the way our world is put together. Like it's painful. It's not only there's lots of biological reasons why that seems like a bad thing, and it also presupposes that there is certain value in humans, like there's an actual being in a human that makes it wrong when you damage it.
Yeah.
But if you believe that we're all just materialists, like bundles of atoms, with the innocent child dying or being killed or whatever.
Yes.
So for that to be wrong, there has to be some meaning associated with that particular group of atoms we call a child.
Good.
Now, but you're assuming that, like, a materialist, which would probably coincide. someone who believes the beliefs I've been presenting would probably be a materialist. And someone who believes that everything is just atoms and matter, and that consciousness is some complicated physical law, just the connection of atoms in the particular way created that.
Right.
There isn't any inherently like morally better thing about a child than a rock, if that's what you believe. I mean, it is unfortunate in our society it paints this functional moral standard out of what works well for us, but that doesn't necessitate in my mind a moral absolute there.
Okay.
Because it's unfortunate, and I'm not saying it's a pleasant thing. I mean, I believe in functional moral standards, but as far as saying it's absolutely wrong, I don't know if that means anything if it's just atoms.
All right. Do you believe that a child has innate value?
See, I want to. I really, really want to.
Why? Why do you want to?
It's built into me. Maybe it's my biology. I don't know.
Okay.
Hey, oh no, you can't do that.
What do you mean I can't?
Well, because you're assuming the only explanation for me wanting to is God. But
No. What I'm assuming is you're onto something, friend. You're absolutely right. That little child has innate value. And doesn't your experience of life validate that day in and day out?
well,
See, I'm appealing to your experience. I'm not saying God is not right in the issue, right in the equation right now. I'm appealing to your experience. Isn't there an innate part of you, that you experience every day when you come in contact with a child that says, yes, that little child has intrinsic value?
absolutely. I want to have kids. I love kids.
Good.
I mean,
I'm with you. Okay, now, is it not possible that that innate understanding that that child has intrinsic value, where does that come from? Is that speaking the truth to you or not?
see, I think this is just another case of where you begin kind of dictates where you end, because you're beginning with this belief in God.
No.
Okay. Well.
No. Let's begin with the child.
Okay, with the child, I would say it's possible. It seems to me that it's possible that my evolution and my behavioral instincts make me want to see an inherent value, where in reality it is just a bag of matter, no different than a rock.
Okay, and now you got to make your decision. And your decision has to be either that child has innate value or it's just a bag of rock. So how are you going to live? What decision are you going to make?
See, what I want to make the one decision, but it seems to me it's not good to make logical decisions based off of what you want.
Okay, I agree. But isn't there something more to that? When you're confronted by a child and you say, you know something? That child has innate value. And there's something deep within me that's driving me to realize that. Isn't it good to say, wow, this is pretty important? This is not, you're like Coca Fresca. This is, is this a bag of rock or is this a human being with innate value? I mean, how do you live your life, right? I mean, how are you going to treat that child?
I mean, I feel like I'd just be repeating myself. I mean, once again, I want to believe that it has innate value, but it doesn't seem logically to me. The rational part of my being doesn't present any good reason to believe it.
Okay, all right.
That's unfortunate, and I respect Christianity a lot.
Does this make sense to you? One of the reasons that I am not an atheist is because I meet very, very few atheists who can live it out consistently. So if you can't live your belief out consistently, shouldn't that force you to go back and question, hey, you know something, is my belief true? See, if I would not be a follower of Christ if as I go through life, the teachings of Christ didn't begin to make more and more sense to me. For instance, Rousseau, right? Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Babies are born perfect. It's just society that corrupts them. Rousseau has his nanny deposit 5 of his babies on the doorstep of the hospital, disowning him. he could not live out what he thought. He was confronted by the frailty and fickleness of little kids. He lost his temper. He didn't have time for them. Don't you have to, if you say you believe something, try and live it out? And then in trying to live out whatever it is you say you believe, if you find it just doesn't square with reality, it's just not true, don't you have to then start saying, gosh, maybe I should switch and believe something else? I respect Camus, Sartre, Nietzsche, right? They're atheists. And they say, okay, because there is no God, despair is the only logical conclusion. And Camus says, why should I? The only question modern man must answer is why not commit suicide? Okay, I respect that. Those guys are taking seriously what they believe. I have almost no intellectual respect for the guy who says, no God, but that little child, really significant. What do you mean, really significant? No.
Yeah,
It's not really significant.
From the other side of the wall, it's the same reason no one respects crusaders or all the classic examples. It's
Good.
the same thing from the other direction.
Exactly. Absolutely. We do not respect the Crusaders for slaughtering people in the name of Christ. Absolutely correct. We don't respect the white Christians who beat up on their black slaves during the week and then they brought them to church on Sunday. No respect. Hypocrisy. Good. So I wouldn't be a follower of Christ if Jesus had said, love everybody, and if he'd whooped up on people. Right? Inconsistent. Hypocrisy. I wouldn't follow him. No way would I follow him. The reason that I follow him is because these ethical teachings, including the value of that little child, make so much sense, and then he lives it out so magnificently, and then he says, Cliff, I want to help you live it out magnificently. And all of a sudden it's, wow, this squares with reality. So that's why I follow him. But if my experience of trying to live out his teachings was, this is ridiculous, I wouldn't follow Christ.
I guess it's unfortunate that typically when I read the Bible, it produces more doubt in my mind than it does strengthen it. And I guess you have the opposite experience.
Okay, well I struggle with doubt, okay? Be real honest with you. I got tons of doubt. So, but when you say, when you read the Bible, it inspires more doubt. Tell me more. What do you mean?
See, right, this is always the tough thing. You say something and then you need a specific example.
No, but the reason I ask it, I find it fascinating. I don't understand. So help me understand.
So,
you don't have to give me too specific a thing, but just, what do you mean when you read the Bible, it produces more doubt?
I guess, to someone who hasn't read the Bible much, it seems very, very much like a muddled mess, and there's lots of I guess, okay, here's a better specific example. So when I read the Bible, it seems to me like if there were a God trying to reach us,
Yep.
that it would do a better job.
Good. I'm with you. Uh-huh.
I mean, but once again, that's difficult to say because I'm not God. I don't know what actually works in
Great
reality.
point.
And case in point, there are a lot of Christians, so.
I mean, you're thinking, and I respect you. I think that's outstanding. And you're being honest. I think you're being honest. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I've experienced the same type of feeling. All right? So how do you work through that? You've never been married, have you?
No.
Well, I am married. And you know something, sir? If you never learn to live with mystery, you're going to have a horrible marriage. My wife, that dear woman, has to live with mystery. Why, Cliff, did you do that? What on earth motivated you, Cliff, to say that? She knows me very, very well. But you get really close to somebody, and you're going to begin to realize, man, I do not have this all figured out. You got to learn to live with mystery. Is my wife real? Of course she's real. Do I love the tar out of her? Yes, I love the tar out of her. Do I understand why she does what she does? At times, yes. But very often, no way. And if I can't learn to live with mystery with my wife, we're going to have a horrible marriage. If that's true between my wife and me, gosh, is that ever going to be true between God and me? I'm going to have to learn to live with mystery, with unanswered questions. Okay, so that's the first point. Make sense? Okay. Second point is, I grew up in a culture of entitlement. I grew up in a culture that taught me, you deserve. And I adopted that. I deserve. But there's a real danger there. And it's that I begin to set up my expectations, and then if people don't meet my expectations and meet what I deserve, bing, cross off, cross off, cross off, cross off. Bitter, angry, you failed me. Well, no, wait a second, the person didn't fail me. I just had these unrealistic expectations and sense of entitlement. I have found, especially as a father and teaching my 3 sons, that it's really important that I teach them a sense of responsibility, not a sense of entitlement. And I find that to be crucial when it comes to me relating to God. If I have all these expectations out there, man, I'm going to get in trouble. Instead, I have to approach God with a humble heart that says, okay, God, you reveal yourself as you choose, not as I dictate, and I want to search for you with an openness and a humility. I think that's crucial. And the more I think about that whole sense, it's like this. I'm talking to a high school kid. He says, prove to me that God exists. I say, I'm sorry, man, I can't prove God exists. I can give you evidence, but I can't prove it. He says, oh yeah, well, I can prove to you God doesn't exist. I said, oh really? Show me. He says, hey God, if you exist, when I touch this, strike me with lightning. See, Cliff, God doesn't exist. What do you do with that, man? That guy is playing a game. Then I speak at MIT, and I'm talking to this PhD, post-PhD, postdoc student, this brilliant woman who can run circles around me intellectually. And she has this incredible, humble faith in Christ that just blows me out of the water. And suddenly I begin to realize, what's the difference between the high school kid who's proven to me that God can't exist and the postdoc in math at MIT who has this profound faith in Christ? And what I begin to realize is it has a ton to do with some expectations and some entitlement and some demanding that God meet these stipulations before God has the privilege of me believing in him. And then finally, I would encourage you to compare. That's what I've been trying to force you to do, obviously. What I've been trying to challenge you to do is ask yourself, say, okay, the reason I can't believe in Christ is because he doesn't meet this standard of evidence. Which means, Christ, I can't believe in you because you don't meet this standard of evidence. So what's the alternative, friend, that meets the standard? And I think if you look at the alternative to whatever it is you chose, I don't know what the alternative is that you have chosen. I think what you're going to find is you might have a double standard here.